everybody. Welcome to Resilient Radio Podcast. I am your host, Daphne Wallace, and I'm also in recovery from substance abuse, mental illness, and trauma. We are breaking the stigma associated with mental illness and addiction for those out there seeking recovery. We are building up a resilient recovery support community and using our platform to share recovery stories on shining a light for anyone out there listening that might need to hear some hope. By doing this, we also provide education and recovery resource options for those in poverty. I'm so excited to have with us on the show today a person in long-term recovery who aims to inspire and make an impact, Jam Alker with the Jam Alker Band. Making a ripple through the sound waves, he is a key player in the recovery movement happening. He has been speaking at different locations, sharing his story on several platforms, as well as using social media to reach out to his fans. No matter how busy he is, he still seems somehow to find the time. Jam has been featured several times and was just signed with Sony Records. Jam, I'm so glad to have you on today. Will you tell us your story of where you came from, the journey through addiction, and now to where you are standing in recovery today?
Absolutely. Thank you, Daphne, for having me on the show. I appreciate it. I appreciate your efforts to continue to educate people and to help break the stigma. We all need to be working in this fight together. So, yeah, you know, as far as my story, I've been through a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of work on myself in recovery, and so I can look back early into my childhood and I can sort of pinpoint some of the moments early on that were sort of the genesis of the trauma that happened in my life that then sort of informed what became my addiction later on. Some of my earliest memories in life I talk about is my dad. One of my earliest memories, my dad walking towards me, stumbling towards me, and there's blood gushing down his face. And I have another memory that is, I've been able to chronologically place directly before that one, and that is of my mom smashing a whiskey bottle over the top of his head to stop his violent advances. So that's, right. You know, that's some of the early memories of mine. And shortly after that, my mom came to pick me up one day and got me in the car, and my brother was in the car. We were living in the way out in the desert in Arizona at the time, and the next thing I knew, I was in Las Vegas, and I don't know how long it was until I saw my father again. She just grabbed me one day, and we left. And so my mom, when we got to Las Vegas, she moved us into these crappy little apartments, and she became a cocktail waitress in one of the casinos there. And soon she met and married another violent alcoholic. And one day she had taken me and my brother out, and we had moved in with him at this point. She took us out for the day, and he was on one of his benders. And when we came home, we found that he had destroyed the house. He had gone through and smashed everything in the house, including going into me and my brother's rooms and breaking and smashing all of our things. And, you know, you would think that my mom, having had the pattern of leaving like she did with my dad, would do the same thing, pack me and my brother up when we would leave. But instead, what she did is she put he and I on a Greyhound bus to go live with my dad, and she stayed with that man. And over the course of the next 7 years, I only saw my mom twice. And so, you know, was back with my father, which was certainly not a picnic, and without a mom, without a mother's love, and that's something that I needed. And really, you know, any kid needs growing up.
Right.
Now, this story isn't unique. I find as I listen to more people tell their story in recovery, I hear of, you know, similar childhood trauma, but that's my story. That's what happened to me. And so, you know, moving forward, I found that what I kept trying to do, and again, I didn't understand it at the time, and I look at this as a sort of another manifestation of my addiction. And when I say that, I mean trying to fill that hole inside of me that there was no way of filling from the outside. But as a teenager, I didn't understand that. I didn't know that that's what I was trying to do. So what I found that I was doing was trying to find any female figure to fill that hole, to fill that void, to fill that lack of a female love, a female attention. So when I found music in my early teens, and I picked up a guitar and I started playing in my first band, I found that I got some attention. I found that I got some attention from the girls, and I liked it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how I was introduced to music. And then that moved forward into my late teens and my 20s. I decided that I was going to, move into the city. I moved to Chicago by then. I was going to move down in the city, and I was going to start a band, and I was going to be a rock star.
Right.
And I had some success. We did some touring, made some records, and things like that. But again, I kept trying to feed that hole that was inside of me. And at this point, it was not only through trying to find attention from the girls, but it was also through substances, through fame, through ego, anything I could do to try to make myself feel better. That restless, irritable discontentedness that we hear about in recovery. I've often talked about feeling like I came out of the womb sort of in that state of restless, irritable discontentedness. Absolutely. So I kept chasing after the next thing to try to fill that hole inside me. I was chasing and chasing, and I could never fill that hole, and I didn't understand why. I thought finally that, girls hadn't done it, and ego and fame and autographs and all of those things hadn't done it. So I thought that if that hadn't done it, it was going to be money that was going to do it. So I took the money I had made, I built a recording studio, started a record label, I started doing some rehabbing of properties in the city, and I started to make a lot of money, and I was still miserable. And I didn't understand why. While I was doing this, I was still, playing some music, and I was out at a club one night, and I met a girl, and she introduced me to heroin. And that was really when my life changed. Up until then, I had done a lot of partying, but, when you're in that scene, when you're a part of that community, when music is your thing, if it's not celebrated, it's at least accepted. And with addiction, unless the consequences are so great that you need to change your actions, you often don't. And the consequences hadn't become that great at that point. But when I found heroin, everything changed. It finally did that thing. It calmed that aching that was inside of me. It filled that void, or at least I thought it filled the void. Maybe it did temporarily. And it's interesting. I've heard the best way that I've ever heard heroin described when someone who has never done it is asked, how does it feel? I talked about that lack of a mother's love, that lack of attention, and the best way I've ever heard heroin explained is it feels like a mother's love. Right. And that was how the journey started, and how I got into heroin, and once that substance entered my body, nothing else mattered anymore. I began to really, I allowed it to consume me. Everything that I had made in terms of, the money, the property, the recording studio, all of those things started to slowly go away as I built anywhere from a $200 to $500 a day habit. And I stopped playing music. I stopped doing everything else that I loved. And, as you know, with substances, what works the first day, you need a little bit more the next day, and you need a little bit more the next day, and then eventually it just stops doing it. And with heroin, you can't just stop. So what started off as a thing that I felt filled that hole before long just became something where it kept me from being sick. I had to spend all that money every day. I wasn't feeling good anymore. I wasn't filling that hole anymore. I wasn't feeling that mother's love anymore. I wasn't feeling that comfort anymore. I was just doing what I needed to do to get by and keep myself from getting sick every day. And that went on for many, many years. Until I finally did reach my bottom. Which is an interesting thing, talking about a bottom. I prefer to look at it as a moment of clarity, because talking about a bottom, oftentimes people think of it as a destination you have to reach, and I don't look at it that way. I've seen people who have lived on the streets who didn't reach their bottom. I've seen people who had their first DUI or lost their job, and that was enough for them to hit what was their bottom. So I don't like to call it that. I like to call it a moment of clarity. And when I finally had my moment of clarity, it is when I finally really did start to change my life.
What do you think during that time that was your biggest, or your biggest support? Where did it start to come from during that transition?
Sure. So when I finally realized that I couldn't do it myself, what happened was that I found out that I was going to be a father, and not understanding the disease of addiction, I still thought that there were, that there were conditions that could be met that would finally get me to stop. There was another line in the sand that I could draw that I wouldn't cross, and I thought, okay, great, I'm going to finally be a father. There's no way I'll be a junkie anymore once I'm a dad. Yeah. And my daughter was born, and I didn't last more than 2 weeks before I was back on the west side of Chicago buying dope again, and that was my moment of clarity when I knew I had no more lines in the sand to draw. There was no way I was going to figure this thing out on my own, and that it was stronger than me, and I needed to reach out for some help. So the support that I got early on is I went to my doctor. And let him know what was going on. And he told me I should go to treatment, and I told him I wasn't willing to go to treatment, that I, didn't need that. I wasn't one of those people. I wasn't weak like that. Again, not understanding the disease and not understanding what treatment was about. So he hooked me up with a guy who was a therapist who was an addiction specialist, a man who was in recovery himself. And I agreed to go and see this gentleman, and that was really my first support. Now, this is while I was still using, but to this man's credit, as much as he wanted me to stop and go to treatment, he knew that I wasn't ready. So, again, to his credit, for the first 6 months while I was still using, he still saw me and supported me, and during that time really helped to break down a lot of the barriers that I had and helped me to really realize that I couldn't do it on my own and that I needed to go to treatment. So that support and wisdom and knowledge that came from my therapist, who, like I said, was an addiction specialist, was really the first early support that helped me to finally come to terms with the fact that I really did need more help than I could give myself, or even that he could give me, and he helped me figure out a path to finally get into treatment, and that was when my life truly changed once I went to treatment.
I think that's so awesome, too, because people really do. To me, it does make a huge difference for people to feel accepted as who they are, where they are, and not condemned or ashamed, and you don't condone it. Some people think that they're condoning it by being there because they don't really understand it all and know how to support someone, maybe. But like you said, I think that's really valuable.
Sure, if I had gone to see him and he had given me an ultimatum telling me that I needed to stop using before the next time that I saw him, I would have never seen him again. And God knows, I would very likely not be alive today doing the work that I'm doing. So, yes, you've got to meet people where they're at, and you've got to be able to be patient. And again, like I keep saying, to his credit, he understands that it's a disease, and that you have to treat the disease, and that takes time. And thank God that he did. Thank God that he didn't condemn me. Thank God that he did give me, the love and support and patience that I needed to get to where I am today.
Right. So after you went through that part of your life and things started picking back up, what was the next venture that you started getting on? Was it continuing on into recovery? What was the direction you started going to?
In the decade plus of my deep heroin addiction, I didn't play music really at all. I talked about I had been in the club playing when I met the girl who introduced me, and after that, there was very little. I had a short stint as a bass player with a band that did some touring while in my addiction, but outside that, I didn't pick up a guitar. I didn't write music. I didn't do anything. When I went to treatment is when everything changed. I took my guitar with me. When I went to treatment, not thinking anything of it. I didn't know what treatment was about. I thought I'd be sitting around, I'd be bored. I thought I'd take my guitar, strum a couple chords, maybe learn a few cover songs, and just help to pass the time. But instead, I was able to use the guitar and use writing and use music as a way to start to heal. And by that, I mean that underlying trauma that I talked about, which in my opinion is at the core, is at the foundation of things. If you don't deal with the underlying trauma, you have very little luck of actually finding long-term recovery. because that underlying pain needs to start to be healed. You have to be able to learn how to deal with the underlying pain, the underlying trauma, the underlying causes and conditions of the numbing behavior, of the sedating behavior, of the addiction. And so I was able to use music. I started writing again. I started writing about my guilt and my shame and the remorse and the things that I had been through. And at the same time, there in treatment, I saw that there were people who had what I wanted and that I needed to do what they were doing. And one of the elements of recovery that I was taught early on is that you needed to have some sort of a spiritual connection, some sort of spiritual awakening. And I had been beaten into this state of reasonableness, so I was willing to do anything it took. I would do whatever they told me once I got to treatment. So I opened myself up to this idea of a power greater than myself, and it truly did manifest to me and inside of me through music. And this music that was coming out of me, I don't know where it was coming from. I've said it before. I felt like an old radio that was finally tuned into the right frequency, and this music almost started to just play through me. I was connected. Something was happening.
That's awesome.
So the combination of using music as a way to express and process the underlying trauma, plus it being my spiritual connection to the creative source, to that thing that some people call God, some people call the universe, some people call the source, and I don't care what you call it. It's that thing that is bigger than you. It is that thing that is the flow that I was constantly working against, trying to do things by my will and my way rather than the way, by a power far greater than myself. And so I opened up, and these are the things that started to happen, and my life truly started to change. Things started to really actually finally get better, and I started to heal, and it really was a just complete rearranging of my inner world. And so I saw that it worked, and I became hungry to continue to learn and work on it. So I left treatment on fire. When I was in treatment, I shared a couple of my songs with the guys in the treatment center, and amazing connections started to form. They were telling me that I was finding words that they hadn't been able to find yet, that I was helping them. I left treatment knowing that one of the foundations of recovery is being of service to others. And I just knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that my passion, that my path, that my purpose moving forward was to use music as a way to help others. I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't know how that was going to happen. All I knew with 100% certainty is that was my path. I had made a lot of money, and I had been miserable. I had had fame, and I was miserable. I had signed autographs. I'd been on the radio. I'd had all the girls. I'd done all of those things, and I was still miserable. The only thing that ever truly made me happy was helping others who could give me nothing in return. So I understood that. So when I left, I didn't care about money anymore. I didn't care about fame anymore. I didn't care about my ego. I just wanted to be of service, and I knew that this gift of music that was given to me was my way, was my conduit to be able to do that. And I think because of that, pureness of purpose, so to speak, amazing doors have opened for me since then. I just finished recording my second album. We just got a deal, like you said, with Sony Music. I'm a recovery activist, a public speaker. I speak about recovery all over the country. I recently was honored to have the opportunity to speak at Google headquarters in Silicon Valley at their third annual mental health awareness conference. A huge honor for me. I don't want to sit here and say these things as a way to brag. I want to talk about them as the gifts of my recovery and the things that have come to me as I have continued to just stay completely aligned with what my purpose is. I didn't care about money. All of a sudden, I am financially secure. I didn't care about fame or ego. All of a sudden, I have a lot of people who are listening to and following the things that I do, and that's great. And I love that, and I truly appreciate it. But my whole goal with the platform that I've created, Jam Alker as the recovery activist, the Jam Alker Band, everything I'm doing in that sense, all of the projects that I'm doing, all of these are for me to build the biggest platform possible so that I can help the most people, so I can be of service to the greatest number of people, because that is truly the only thing that has ever made me happy and is the thing that keeps the needle out of my arm.
And that is awesome. And that is the reason why when you talk about the successes you have, because you're so genuine, they're not, to the people that need to hear your message, they don't come off as you bragging, first and foremost. They come off as that could be possible for me too in my life. And maybe something like that, I come from a broken place. That is shining a lot of hope out there for someone in the darkness, like we know people in the darkness needs to see, so you're so genuine, and I appreciate that, and I know a lot of other people appreciate that about you, and I know your fans, that's one of the, besides your awesome talent and your personality, you're genuine, and that matters, and that's why you're going to make a huge impact and be set apart, I believe, from a lot of people. But I also know that there's going to be a lot more musicians I have faith in, and I've been keeping my eyes out that's coming up too in recovery, and I'm just excited about this network and everybody networking together and working on the mission of helping others.
Absolutely, that's what it's about. And I appreciate the nice things that you just said to me. They truly are, all of these things truly are just gifts of my recovery. It is not hard for me to remain humble, because I know from my own experience that if left to my own devices, if left to my way of doing things, I am on the west side of Chicago buying heroin. This is all happening not because of the way the Jam Alker wants to do things. This is because I followed those who had what I wanted. I followed those who were doing things that were making their life better. And at the core of all of that was humility, was service, was being there for others, was giving back what was so freely given to us. So I feel like I don't have a choice. Like, I have that internal barometer now. I know when I start to feel that thing inside of me, that negativity, that darkness, it is when I start to feed my ego, when I start to believe the bullshit that I'm doing something better than the next person, when I start to worry about how many followers I have or any of that other stuff, I feel that thing inside, and I know where that leads. But when I stay on the side of things where I am just doing it because this is the thing that keeps me happy in my recovery, which is being of service to others, that takes me into the light, that takes me into the positivity. And that is not what comes naturally to me. So it is very easy for me to not buy into my own bullshit that I'm better than anyone else. Because, like I said, left to my devices, I'm probably dead right now. So I do not get this twisted. These are gifts of my recovery. And I have to keep my recovery first. I will not lose these things, that I've gotten in my recovery. If I were to go back, I will give them away, right? I've seen it, I've done it. I will lose all of these things. I will give them away if I go back to that life.
That's right. And what an awesome journey, you can, with everything you experienced so far, and the same for me in my life, if I were to go back and not be working on my recovery and not be pursuing something, I won't ever get to experience all the other great things that I know is in my future that I get to be a part of and witness, and people that need help, and being able to make a difference, being able to part.
Absolutely. And something that you mentioned before, as far as me possibly being able to provide hope to others and for others to be able to see what it is that I'm doing, and that's potentially possible for them. Yes. I want to make sure that it's real clear if anybody is out there listening and that they're comparing their journey to mine, and that means that, they might, get on a stage in front of 1,000 people or go and speak at Google or have a bunch of, social media followers or something like that, that's not what it's about. And if that's what you're seeing and that's what you're measuring as the success, right, that will not be a success. If you're looking to me for hope and guidance, if you're looking to me as an inspiration, look at finding your purpose, whatever it may be, and then following your purpose with everything you have inside of you, because that's what it's about. It's never going to look exactly like mine, and I understand I am extremely blessed for the for the notoriety and the fame or whatever BS word you want to call it, but that is not what it is about. These are all gifts of me following my purpose, and I can't stress it enough. That purpose is being of service to others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if people want to listen to your music or buy some albums or however you're selling them, where can they go to get them?
So just go to jamalker.com. From there are links to all the social media, all of the, music streaming services or downloading, or you can buy merchandise or actual CDs there if you still do CDs. But the best thing, rather than me giving, 20 different outlets or links that you can go to, just go to jamalker.com, 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 and you can find anything that you need from there.
That's awesome. I thank you so much for sharing your story today, and hopefully people can, benefit and be impacted even further. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest or submit your story to us, email clientservices@tentalk.org. That's clientservices@tentalk.org. You are brave, you are important, and you are needed to fight this war on drugs. You have been listening to Resilient Radio Podcast. Join our group on Facebook and check out how we are transforming the social service industry by going to tabiztalk.com, TABIZ talk.com. Join our newsletter for updates. Thanks again, Jam, for coming on, and thank everyone for listening. This is Resilient Radio.